Morning, everybody. A lot to get through in the next hour and a half. As usual for Zoom type meetings, if everybody stays on mute, you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Either raise your hand physically by waving at your camera, or preferably use the electronic hand, and we'll do our best to capture all of those. So. Without further ado, we'll make a short update from Maritime UK. Lots going on. Obviously, the response to COVID continues to be sort of front and center of mind, but indeed a lot of time is also being spent more on the longer term recovery. And two areas that I'll just focus upon. Firstly, there is a lot of work going on in government across DFT and particularly BAYS for a UK shipbuilding programme. Essentially, it's a British ships or ships for British operators should be built in the UK. That's the basis of it. Exactly what that looks like and what that means in reality is being worked through. But there certainly appears that there's going to be some form of financial instrument to help UK shipbuilding, and obviously the Navy are heavily involved in that. The second area just to focus upon is the environment, and yesterday it was the Prime Minister announced his 10-point plan for the recovery of the green industrial revolution, as is being termed. And within that, green and maritime features very strongly. And there's a £20 million competition being put forward to develop clean maritime technology. That's something that we'll be following up through the LEP. And indeed, a lot of the other elements, things like hydrogen now and wind, offshore wind, become very focused as well. The other point to mention from Maritime UK is the Maritime UK Awards, which took place last week virtually from Plymouth. But I'm delighted to say that the Solent LEP won the category for future skills, and many congratulations to all of those who are involved in the skills programs across the Solent. It's now been recognised nationally. So in terms of our agenda this morning, we have two presentations, and I'll just pull those up so I can. So the first one is from Dr Katja Samuel from GSDM Global, and I'm sure Katja will explain that business. Then Lorna will give some further updates on the Solent LEP. And then we have Richard Parkinson from Solent Gateway, and that will be around about 5 to 10, and we aim to finish by 10:30. So a lot to get through. And perhaps without further ado, I'll hand to Katja to take the first item. Over to you, Katja.
Lovely, thanks very much. So let me just screen share. Great, let me just minimize this out of the way. Anyway, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for the opportunity to just share a few reflections with you today on the topic of resilience and some of the challenges that are facing the marine maritime sector at the moment. By way of brief introduction, I served in the Royal Navy for 12 years, served on board 3 frigates, 1 destroyer in different operational contexts. I'm a logistics officer by background, but I'm also a barrister, and I've I've practiced in different areas of law. Then I left the Navy. I went into academia, specialising in particular in international law and terrorism, counter-terrorism, which then led to doing disaster risk management. And in the margins, I ran a 4-year multinational counter-terrorism project and input into parliamentary inquiry. Then in 2017, I founded GSDM, Global Security Disaster Management. I couldn't think of a clever short name, so I put on the tin what we do. And very much our focus is on resilience, bringing together the background, both my own and the team, in security and disaster risk, and focusing particularly on man-made and technological risk within the resilience space, with particular expertise in drone management and counter-drone. So in terms of what I'm going to cover, have a brief look what is resilience, why does it matter, the importance of taking a comprehensive integrated approach to resilience, going to touch very briefly on mass and counter-driven resilience as examples, and finish off briefly by looking at the emerging threat and risk landscape of particular relevance to this sector. So what is resilience? My apologies if I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs. But one of the things which has become clear in the sort of COVID post context is that resilience means different things to different people. And in fact, one of my colleagues, he talks about the Frankenstein approach to it, and that there's a lack of coherence and understanding to even what the term means. And in part, that's because there are some national, international standards which deal with issues of resilience, but they're currently under review, but there are gaps. So on the one hand, it's really positive in that the importance of resilience is more prominent, but a bit blurred as to what it might mean. So in terms of what do I mean by resilience, I think a good starting point is British Standard 65,000. And it's the key terms that I've highlighted, in that you anticipate, you prepare for, you respond to the identified threats and risks relevant to your business, to your sector, and when an incident occurs, or in response to the emerging threat and risk landscape, you adapt so that your preparedness and your response are always the most effective possible. So key attributes of resilience, well, it's proactive rather than reactive, something which is often challenging for business, for industry. You're looking at the effective management of strategic risk, which has to come out of the correct identification of what that risk is and related vulnerabilities. And it's much, much more than business continuity or disaster recovery, although of course they form an integral part of resilience. It requires flexibility and agility, particularly if there's a disruption, of which we've experienced many this year, and certainly with Brexit on the very near horizon, the potential for disruption increases. Adaptive for the future as well. Key elements of resilience. So when we've been developing tools, we start off with the assessment of risk. And within that, I would also put threat, hazard, vulnerabilities. You identify it, you analyze it, you evaluate its potential implications on your business. And out of that comes correct planning, your prevention and mitigation of risk, your preparedness. If there's an incident, then your response, your recovery, and your review. And you might have seen sometimes circular diagrams of risk assessment leading to planning, to preparation, incident response, and so forth. And one of the issues with that is that it can suggest that these first three limbs of assessment of risk, planning and preparedness should only be revisited and evaluated if there is an incident, whereas I suggest that this is a linear approach, in that these three key aspects of assessment, planning preparation must always be kept under review, in particular in response to the emerging and changing threat and risk landscape, which certainly technological innovation brings. So why does it matter? Well, clearly prevention and mitigation of risk is much better than having to deal with an incident. It prevents loss and damage, whether that's economic, whether that's reputational. And in some cases, if you can prevent a primary incident from occurring, then that can stop the rolling effect of cascading disasters of secondary, tertiary and so forth incidents that might come out of that. Clearly reduces the risk of liability and litigation, which is on everyone's mind. And it's actually most cost effective. So I've put in a couple of figures that have been frequently cited within the circles that I've been operating in. So the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, it's effectively the secretariat for a global disaster risk reduction plan called the Sendai Framework 2015 to 2030. And one of the figures that it has frequently cited, drawn from the insurance sector, is that for each dollar invested in disaster risk prevention, $18 of disaster loss and impact can be saved. The World Bank takes a more modest approach in saying $1 of investment for each $4 which is saved. But the message is the same. It is that being reactive can be much more costly to an organization than sometimes what can be a fairly modest investment to deal with the prevention and mitigation aspects to become more resilient. So the importance of an integrated approach. One of the things I find, because I straddle both the security and the disaster risk sector, was I became increasingly aware, particularly in the context of man-made and technological risk, that the risk, the threats, the vulnerabilities inherently touch on both sectors. And I would add to that also safety aspects. And what can often happen is that a single dimensional approach can be taken. So for example, there's a particular emphasis on security, or for example, within IMO, particular emphasis on safety. In other sectors, they'll focus on the disaster risk contingency planning side. Whereas if we're going to be truly resilient, we need to consider each of those three areas. And the area where I believe some of the most potential gaps and vulnerabilities can emerge is where these different sectors intersect. So if we look at the list in the middle where the three paradigms intersect. So for example, NATEC, that's where a natural disaster, such as an extreme weather event, like extreme rain resulting in flooding, it could be a wildfire, where that triggers a technological incident. And that could be, for example, with a chemical plant, could affect a power grid. And for over 20 years now, there's been ongoing discussion about the lack of integration between the threat and risk factors which are considered for a natural disaster compared with those for technological risk. And there really is a pressing need in terms of our doctrine, our regulations, our policies, our protocols, our thinking at every level, to think much more in terms of how to better integrate all of these factors into one approach, which is something I've been working on with my team for some time. So the importance of an integrated approach, well, one is that if this approach is not taken, then not all relevant threat risk hazards will be identified. And I would suggest that can result in often unnecessary gaps and vulnerabilities. So we place primary importance on getting the risk and vulnerability assessment correct, because if that's not correct, if it's not comprehensive, then everything else that will follow in terms of time, investment, effort, such as the planning, such as the preparedness for identified incidents, it's going to be fundamentally flawed because all relevant factors have not been considered. So, for example, if I take example of critical national infrastructure protection, port, shipping, oil and gas installations, wind farms, and so forth, CP&I, so the Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure, its primary focus is on security. So the doctrine, the focus, the risk and vulnerability aspects will focus primarily on those aspects, in particular counterterrorism. Its concern is not on safety and disaster risk, whereas for CNI, it will look to consider each of those three factors, but not necessarily in a fully integrated way or in a way which keeps fully up to date with the emerging threat and risk landscape. And indeed from that, you know, something with my legal background, I've often wondered is to what extent any failure to properly identify and integrate all relevant factors is a potential failing in due diligence with potentially catastrophic implications. You know, is it flawed doctrine? You know, so let's look at what due diligence is. So a government, quasi-governmental organisation, or a corporate which is performing a government function, such as running a CNI, is bound by the principles of due diligence, and this involves some international treaty and customary international law obligations. And effectively, the obligations are to prevent harm, to protect the population, and to ensure adequate reparations where harm occurs. And it requires that reasonable and appropriate steps to foreseeable harm are taken. And the more significant and potentially catastrophic the impacts of harm might be, then the higher the threshold to be met to be considered reasonable and appropriate in law. And my concern is whether it's CNI or whether it's at the corporate level, that if this integrated approach is not fully taken, not only is an entity not maximising its resilience, but potentially it's failing in its legal obligations too, including under the principle of due diligence. So with some trepidation in the current audience, let me just very briefly illustrate that. So if we look at the mass context and think of each of those factors of security, disaster risk, and safety, which is in the next slide, we can see already some of the different factors at play. It's that whether it's satellite disruption, that could be through extreme space weather, it could be the effect of space debris, it could be through jamming and spoofing. It could be a direct implication on the satellite, which could affect a remote operating center. There could be the effects of extreme weather or cyber effect that affect the power grid, that in turn affects the remote operating center, or there could be a direct attack on it. And of course, there's many other factors that we could add there in terms of seeing the different factors at play. So in terms of potential impacts that straddle each of those three paradigms, whether you're looking at a collision and grounding with resultant pollution, salvage, loss, search and rescue, whether there's port damage involved, the impact on business continuity. At the other side, you can see the potential for there to be an attempt by a hostile actor to take control of a ship, to divert sensitive cargo, which may or may not involve dual-use technology, which would be in breach of trade export regulations. Potentially, the ship could be weaponized. There have been incidents of port ramming. It could be held to ransom, and so forth. And certainly there's much important work that goes on in relation to each of those aspects. But if we're going to be truly resilient, it's broadening the conversation and thinking more widely about what factors should not only be considered, but also integrated. So let me come now on to drone. So one of the things we've been doing as a team, and we have within the team a research and an operational component, is looking at the whole issue of what risks and threats are posed by drones. And quite a lot of the training that we've been designing is to do with myth versus reality. There seems to be quite a lot of fear and misconception about what a drone can and cannot do. And some of the responses to drone incidents have either been overreactive or they've been underreactive. So if we look closer to home at Folly, I have great interest in Folly, living the other side of Southampton Water, is that there was an incident with drones about this time last year, some hobbyists having a marvellous time flying around the structures, but it actually led to stopping production at, I imagine, significant cost to the installation. Whereas if there'd been a true understanding about what the drones could or could not do, there was no suggestion that they were weaponized, there was no suggestion that there was a hostile actor involved, and had the drones hit the installations, they would have broken. That's an example of overreaction just by not fully understanding what the true threat and risk was. And then at the other end of the scale, we have Gatwick, that as in December 2018, which resulted in disruption of about 200,000 passengers, multi-million loss to both the airport and airlines and other businesses, with again those first few hours not taking some of the best responses, and many lessons have been learned there. And in some cases, in relation to a drone threat, you know, we would say to organisations, actually, if you have a team who can distinguish between a drone and a crane light, or between an aeroplane, and have a set of binoculars, that might be as much as you need, or your best wave of defence before you consider multi-million-pound investment in drone defence technology. So type of resilience challenges which have come up, these are just some examples. Key point that I want to bring out is from the Saudi weaponized drone strikes in September last year, Abqaiq. They were military grade weaponized drones. Is that some of the key lessons brought out was intelligence failings, inadequate assessment and management of the risk, recurring issues that there can be flawed or incomplete doctrine, and even lack of clarity within the national context as who has got the lead. And of course, this had extraordinary implications, including with Brent and global oil supplies in the short term. And in terms of key lessons that we can draw out from that, well, one is in terms of what is the threat and risk landscape, you know, closer to home in the UK. There's a general sense that weaponized drones in the UK is a matter of when, not if. And certainly Islamic State, they had very effective and well-developed effectively factory in Iraq and Syria that they could weaponize commercial off-the-shelf drones. They could use 3D printers to produce their own, and tens of thousands of foreign fighters have gone back to an estimated 150 plus countries. And clearly that blueprint and that technology and understanding is out there. And in fact, it has been used already in Southeast Asia. And one of the key lessons that we learn from the like of Abqaiq facility is that no technological solution could have prevented those impacts. And it brings on to the issue of resilience. One is that resilience is part of an educational journey, and understanding the benefits that it can bring to business. There can, as I've mentioned, be an overdependence on counter-drone technology, and a false understanding, this isn't just within the UK, but overseas as well, that a multi-million-pound investment will make a business and organisation, a CNI, resilient. But it won't. It might be part of resilience planning, but in terms of current capability, what counter-drone technology can do is it can detect, it can identify, it can track, and in certain circumstances, defeat, for example, with a jammer. But that brings a whole lot of high-level issues with itself because of the collateral impacts of it. The technology is still fairly immature in terms of developing. It can struggle with a single drone incursion, which will become more significant when I talk about the emerging threat and risk landscape. And often an organisation won't maximise the value of its investment by properly embedding it within the broader resilience of an organisation. And clearly, one of the things that a technological solution cannot do is it cannot provide for the broader resilience considerations, that if the technology doesn't work or if it's partially successful, part of the discussion and planning needs to be the what if. What if it doesn't work? Have we got our crisis management plans fully in place? Are we fully ready to respond and recover from an incident? And then just finishing up briefly with what does the emerging threat and risk landscape look like? Again, I don't want to overstate it, but nor do I want to understate it. So this is aerial drone swarm. The artificial intelligence as it stands at the moment is such that drones cannot be fully autonomous, but the AI is developing. So drone swarms could be operated by having multi-operators there. Drone swarms have been used already, for example, by Hezbollah against the Israeli Defense Forces, and were described as terrifying. And no capability that exists at the moment technologically could cope with this. So we must plan for the broader what if. And in terms of the maritime sector, clearly there's an aerial threat, but just being mindful too of the subsurface threat. So these are Chinese Jianglong drones, underwater vehicles. Russia, China, and the US has this capability. Currently, it's surveillance capability, but of course, if this was to be weaponized, it could pose extraordinary threats to oil and gas installations, wind farms, shipping, ports, whether at sea or the likes of Folly, which sit alongside the water. And again, in terms of our resilience planning, we need to be mindful of what the emerging threat and risk landscape looks like. So really, just in conclusion to say, I don't believe a resilient approach is optional. The examples I've given have focused on CNI, but they apply across the board to different types of business. And then significantly, proper preparedness can prevent or mitigate potential loss and damage to an organisation, and ultimately makes good business sense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Katja. Fascinating, I have to say. I have a question, but I'll open it up to the full audience first of all for any questions anyone has. Can't see anybody coming forward, so I'll ask my question. Katja, what's your view of the world's preparation and readiness and resilience to face a global pandemic. I'm chair of a couple of businesses. Both had the global pandemic in their business continuity plans as being probability extremely low, impact extraordinarily high, and as a consequence hadn't really done too much about it and became completely reactive. Your thoughts around resilience to global pandemic?
Clearly, what happened in March was a shock at multiple levels. And I think what it showed many organisations is that they were not resilient. So on a positive, I think one of the things that COVID has done is it's made many organisations rethink their way of working and what systems and processes that they need to put in place. And I think even looking at, the current national, lockdown, the sense of, unless you're a high street business that has had to close, that the sense of business as usual, people are getting on with their day jobs. I think a real positive is that we've become more resilient. One concern that I have, and I have to say to some extent, I'm surprised that it's not happened. Yeah, I hope it doesn't. But two of the things that I'm fixated about from a resilience perspective is one, the protection of our ICT, so our whole communication network, but also power grids. And I worry especially about power grids, whether it's through physical attack, whether it's through cyber attack, because clearly if you take out power, the ventilators aren't going to work. We wouldn't be able to communicate in this increasingly virtual world. One of the things we say in the counter-drone space is that's brilliant if you've got your drone defense system in place, but what happens if you lose power? What is your backup plan to a risk? So I'd say that so many good things have come out of it, but we're still on a journey.
Okay, thank you.
I wondered, may I just pick up on Phil Buckley's very helpful comment, just to say you're absolutely right, Phil, and I apologise in terms of just trying to hone in on a few issues in the presentation, if in any way it came across as being anti-drone. So we actually look at drone management and counter-drone, so I just focus on the counter-drone side. Clearly, there are lots of resilience issues to do with drone management as well. For example, the unmanned traffic management systems that will be, so when the drone space, and it is a reality. And one of the things we've seen come out with COVID is the fantastic ways that drones have been used to develop, deliver medication and packages and carry out surveys and so forth. But there's going to be resilience challenges there too. So many of the same issues to do with cybersecurity, with power grid integrity will apply similarly in that context. And that's before one even gets into the detail of all the aviation and drone related regulations. I think one of the challenges at the moment is the lack of standards. I know work has been done on that. One of the things we're looking strategically with the work that we're doing is that it can actually form the basis of potential future international standards as well. So we're speaking with the BSI, the British Standards Institute, on that, but it's looking how we best plug those gaps at the moment.
Thank you, Katja.
Sorry, Kevin, could I come in on that? It's Phil speaking.
Yes, go ahead, Phil.
Thank you, Katja. I guess where I'm coming from is it's very easy to see things in to be resistant of new technology. It's kind of what we've always done for hundreds of years. I just feel that particularly in the Solent here, we've got 3 harbour authorities, maybe 4, that already control the whole Solent from a vessel point of view, but have no authority through regulation on things like people or autonomous vessels, activities, drones, whatever. So I think if we change the Polaroid setting on the sort of regulation, we might be able to bring some of these vehicles into that regulation where we already have significant powers. And also with 5G, the Internet of Things, there's an opportunity. Again, we've got all sorts of buoys, beacons, posts right across the region. If we put, I don't know what they are, 5G repeaters, aerials, whatever, there is an opportunity through government regulation to be able to provide a local 5G network. And then all of a sudden the offering that we can give leisure users, commercial operators, swimmers, ornithologists, Amazon drone delivery could be fantastic. And if you're controlling the network, I wonder, in my Machiavellian way, whether that means you control the activity. You know, if you're not licensed, you don't operate here, and I can turn it off and your drone falls out of the sky. Just trying to be sort of on the front foot for drones rather than say they're all terrible and we should shut them down. Which
we would not say. So one of the things that I've focused in today is the team have responded to many of these incidents, UK and overseas. So these are some of the recurring themes that we find in terms of how can we make ourselves more resilient. And part of it is, so for example, where there can be a default to a technological solution, often a much cheaper, more effective way will simply be to revisit internal working within an organisation over which businesses and entities do have control, to rethink even, you know, when was the last time we updated our approach to risk and vulnerability assessments? You know, how up to date are our systems and our protocols and our training? Do we have the right manpower in place to respond to this emerging landscape? So for a fairly minimal investment, I think organizations could significantly improve their internal resilience. So I guess what I was trying to do on a Wednesday morning was throw a few thoughts into the mix, just to get people maybe thinking, have we got everything in place that perhaps we could and should have in place? What more could we do?
Agreed.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Katja. We have one question, and then I think we'll draw this item to a close. Simon.
Good morning. Thank you, Katja. Very interesting. In 2016, the NHS ran Exercise Cygnus, which was looking at an H2N2 virus pandemic. And quite a lot was learned from that, which was studiously ignored by HMG. And yet countries like Singapore took great interest in it, and it helped them a lot. How on earth do you get doctrine, where doctrine is rife in organizations, how do you get people to actually pay attention to what you're saying? Because they think it's just statistically unlikely. They don't see black swans coming. How do you deal with it?
You know, to me, the fact that we even talk about black swans and grey rhinoceros, you know, I think, well, the fact that we're talking about it is clearly there's some element of it existing. You know, even if I can roll the clock back a little bit more in terms of the strategy and the doctrine itself, sometimes an issue can be that it is fundamentally flawed, or it has gaps in it. So again, for a bit more controversy this Wednesday morning, I have to say that just over a year ago, when the UK government published, you know, the first sort of counter-drone strategy, with great excitement, I had a look at it, and I'm afraid it was the normal default factors. It's all about education and more investment in industry. There was not one word of resilience. There was not one word of the need to take a more integrated threat and risk approach. And I have these conversations, you know, in the margins of what I'm doing, saying, you know, if our doctrine isn't right, then how are our regulations and our legislation going to accommodate for everything, which makes implementation even more challenging? So I get on a bit of a thorn in those circles, saying I think we just need to think much more dynamically. And then you're absolutely right, the issue of implementation is always a challenge. But I think that's part of the educational journey as well. That if people think, well, I've got to do this because, you know, I'll be prosecuted or fined if I don't, that's not a great incentive. You know, people might do it reluctantly. But if they look at it and think, actually, what could we benefit from this as an organisation? You know, what are the financial, the economic, the strategic benefits for us? So I think quite a lot of this is a paradigm shift, even in terms of our thinking and our approach.
Thank you, Katja. I think it's been one very educational and equally very timely as well. So thank you very much. Really great insight. Lorna, let's turn to you. Updates on the LEP, please.
Yeah, if you'll forgive me, I've got 2 laptops here. I'm going to have to read from this one, so I won't be looking at you, but I'm thinking of you all as I'm doing it. I just want to say, Katja, you talk about some horrible things like terrorism, but with such a lovely voice. Right, okay, so updates from the LEP. 3 things, maybe 4, I want to talk to you about. So we had the Maritime UK Solent Shadow Board meeting yesterday. A economic recovery plan is in development for the Solent. It sits alongside and complements the Maritime UK National Economic Recovery Plan. And it's going to be considered by the board next Tuesday. They're looking at economic growth, skills, innovation and decarbonisation. The Freeport consultation went live on Monday this week, and the LEP's been asked by partners to lead the work on developing a proposal for the Solent. That's not new news, we knew that, it's just that it's gone live this week. The bids need to be in by the 5th of February. Vivid Economics are going to be supporting us in developing the applications. We do expect competition to be fierce. There's only going to be 10 nationally. We think we've got a really good case for it. That's not to say that others are not going to think that they've got an even better case for it, but just to keep you in the loop, to let you know that that's happening. The ERDF Restart and Recovery and Kickstarting Tourism Grants Fund is open. It's to support SMEs to adapt and diversify in response to the impact of COVID-19. There are grants available of between £1,000 and £3,000, up to £5,000 in exceptional circumstances. And the purpose of the grant is to help SMEs access specialist advice to address their immediate needs in response to COVID. Where a strong case is made, the grant may be used to purchase minor equipment. Now, the full details about that are on the Solent LEP website, but if that is something that you would like to investigate a bit further, I can forward this email to you if you drop something in the chat if you'd like to see it, or as I say, go to the website, the LEP website. Can't get my words out this morning. On that subject of forwarding emails and so on, and someone's already mentioned GDPR this morning. I know we've had the request for you to share each other's email addresses within the network. We've been tripped up a little bit by Portsmouth City Council in terms of how we do that from a GDPR point of view. We do now have a statement that we will be sending to you, blind copy email, that you'll need to RSVP to. And once we've got your express permission to share, we will do that. A second update that I wanted to share with you is we talked about careers last time. We were in the middle of Maritime UK Week, and we had a focus on careers and skills and a careers programme locally. If I can just report firstly that the virtual career fair on the Wednesday that week was terrific. It was fairly hairy for the first 40 minutes whilst we got the technology working perfectly, but those of you that are in this meeting this morning that supported us with that, I'm just so grateful. We had 526 people access the virtual careers fair that day, which is astounding, and we were delighted. Will and I got very stressed in the couple of days leading up to it and in that first 40 minutes, but it was terrific. One of the things we talked about last time was ways of employers getting involved with the careers programme locally. And something that Solent LEP Careers Hub is looking to do is to trial virtual work experience. And we need your help. We need about 15 employers locally to join us in this, to support some local schools on a trial for virtual work experience. It will be in March, 24th to the 26th of March. It's 3 days. It will involve you being involved in Zoom calls or Teams calls or whatever, but engaging with young people. We're hoping to have about 300 young people go through the programme. So each employer clearly would be looking after about 20. It's not asking you to be available from 9 till 5 solidly for 3 days, but it is looking at you reflecting on your own organisation and seeing whether you could be involved as an organisation and support us. It is without question the most frequently asked frequent request to me and to the Careers Hub for from careers advisors in schools and colleges. So again, I've got another email here with information about that. If you're interested in being part of that, 24th to the 26th of March, if you can contact me, please. You can either do that by email, you've all got my email, I'm sure, or pop something in the chat. I'm really, really keen that the maritime sector is well represented as part of those 15 employers. You won't be all 15 because we need to show breadth, but if I can just, oh, and here's the cat, she always joins us. If I can just ask you about that. And then I wanted to just very finally give you a very quick update on the Institute of Technology bid. So the Institute of Technology bids, for those of you that haven't heard this before, I'll do a quick update. For those of you who have, forgive me. Solent Uni and Portsmouth Uni are putting together a bid to bring an Institute of Technology to the Solent. That it has to come from the universities and it has to be supported by local business. The technologies that they will be looking to, or rather the subjects that they will be looking to offer as part of the Institute of Technology are maritime, technology and advanced manufacturing. So all highly appropriate for our geographical area. We are moving through the process to put together a bid. We have to submit that bid by the 14th of December. We have key core partners coming on board from the employers, and we're hoping it's going to be BAE, IBM, the Royal Navy and Kinetic, we hope. That's moving quite quickly. The lead university will be Solent, and I don't know who the lead FE provider is going to be yet. It's either Isle of Wight College or Fareham. That's been decided this week. There is a steering group meeting on the 25th, I was going to say Thursday, but it's Wednesday, from 9 till 10 o'clock. If you're interested in being part of that steering group meeting to find out a bit more about it and perhaps to throw your hat in the ring to be a bit more involved in that progression, you're very welcome to join us. If you want to talk to me about that, again, you can email me or pop your name in the chat and we'll come back to you. But that bid has got to go in on the 14th of December. So that's kind of my updates from the LEP. I've done all 5. Brilliant.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. Can I just clarify one point in your update? The Freeport bit it's not a consultation now. This is now the bid. So there were 2 phases to the Freeport work. First was a consultation to government to help them shape their policy. That's been done. This is now the actual bid. So this is the important bit now. This is actually getting our bid in to be one of the 10. Okay, I think then, Richard, we're ready to move to you, Solent Gateway.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Lorna. Well, first of all, thank you all for the opportunity to share Solent Gateway's plans for developing March reports with you. Just before I launch into the presentation, I've got two people supporting me today. I've got Jonathan Best from Montague Evans, who is our planning advisor. And I have, and also with us is Georgina Chapman from Grasshopper Communications, who and Grasshopper Communications are providing our communications and stakeholder engagement support. And in fact, Georgina will be controlling the slides for me because she doesn't trust me. So on that basis, Georgina, could we have the first slide, please? Great, thank you very much. So let me smooth that. So for those who don't know, Marchwood Military Port, which I will now call Marchwood Port. Marchwood Military Port was the MOD's cargo port since 1943. So it doesn't take grey Royal Navy warships. It's the MOD's cargo port. So all of its cargo that goes overseas by sea comes through Marchwood Port. And the MOD for a long time realised that they had a very valuable asset in Marchwood Port that was very much underutilised. And so as far back as 2010, made a decision to compete a 35-year lease to bring in a commercial partner who would develop the port for them and bring in that commercial business. So it does mean that for the first time since the existence of the port, it is now open for commercial business, which in itself means it's a significant opportunity. The site is, if we could go on to the next slide, please. Thanks, Georgina. The site, it covers a total of 82.8 hectares, so 205 acres, so it's a big site. The port will continue with military and commercial based cargo and imports and exports. So it's very important to emphasize that it will continue with military and commercial based cargo because we already do commercial operations. And I think an important message for me to put across now is that the port is no longer Marchwood Military Port. It is Marchwood Port, which is a commercial port, and one of our customers who we provide a service to is the MOD. And in fact, we already, before we've even started to develop the port, we already have more commercial activity than MOD activity going on at the moment. But we think it's an opportunity to develop what we would describe as a high quality port-centric logistic hub. As everybody knows, it's located on a river test. We're directly opposite ABP Southampton. So we're on the test with access to international shipping lanes. We've got great rail connectivity that goes from our quayside throughout the port and onto the main line rail. And we also have easy access onto the motorway network, 10-15 minutes off the motorway network. And of course, one of the advantages of our location is we can reach the motorways avoiding Southampton city centre. So we do think that this is a real opportunity for Solent Gateway to deliver growth, investment and job creation in the local area and the wider region, and especially during the COVID recovery period where the economy is under so much strain. Next slide, please, Georgina. So here's an aerial view of the port, and you can see the boundary highlighted in red. As I said, it's 82.8 hectares. Currently, we have 46.4 hectares for operational space, and we will be developing about 54.5 hectares. So that means we're going to be improving some of the operational space we have already, and we're going to be developing new operational space on the areas that you can see that are green and are unused at the moment. And those 54 acres includes, of course, some of the land we will have to use to deliver biodiversity net gain. But that gives you an idea of the scale of the site, and the aerial view shows how much of the port is actually covered in green rather than hard standing. Next slide, please, Georgina. Thank you. So we have 2 jetties available for commercial use. There is a 3rd jetty, but it's just a very small jetty that's just used by the MOD and will continue to be used by the MOD. So current infrastructure, we have an excellent quayside. We've got marshalling areas, haulier parks, areas of hard standing and open storage. And we have, bearing in mind we have to reserve a certain amount of space for the MOD, we have 8.5 hectares available now for commercial activity, most of which is taken. Since Solent Gateway formed, we have created about 85 new posts. So we have 85 staff on site, and they include trained stevedores, and security staff. And our trained stevedores also act as reserve soldiers, reserve port operator soldiers for the Army, so they can support 17th Port and Maritime Regiment, which is the local Army regiment. So we've already created, as I say, about 85 new posts since we formed. And we have a lot of capability through our 51 highly trained stevedores to provide services. Our current commercial operations include rail import and storage. So we import 108 metre rail segments and we store them for Network Rail. So Network Rail wants to use them. We've done car storage, auto storage. We've done wind turbine blade shipment, transshipment operations. We're currently containing. We're currently storing a lot of containers, and that seems to be growing with the national crisis for space for containers. We've done numerous project cargoes, and we are now importing and storing pipes as part of a project for the ExxonMobil Fawley refinery just down the coast from us. And we're also leasing areas of land to local businesses. Currently, to put it into context, we've got about 2,900 TEUs, containers in the port, and we've just created a couple more acres to accommodate more to help out with this sort of shortage of space for containers. We're working to attract businesses to support the local prosperity and the sustainability industry, and we do hope that we are going to bring new business to the Solent region, and we think that's one of the opportunities we're creating with the extra space and port facilities is we can attract new businesses into the region, and we're having a number of conversations with businesses that would want to have a footprint in the region. So good news for the region. We've currently got five acres being marketed. As I say, a couple of those will probably be now used for containers. But that gives you an idea of what happens in the port at the moment from commercial use. Next slide, thank you, Georgina. So we do think that our plans to develop the port are absolutely in line with national and local policy. We are part of we do feature in the New Forest District Council local plan. As you can see that we feature under policy Econ 3, where it says the council will work cooperatively with SGL to enable the effective and efficient use of the site and the port facility for commercial, economic and local employment. And because you're all involved in the maritime industry, you will know that we are also very consistent with national policies such as the Maritime 2050 strategy and the National Strategy for Ports 2012. So very much in line with national and local policy. Next slide, please, Georgina. So in terms of our proposal of what we wanted to do with the port, we're going to be creating a lot of new areas for hard standing for commercial operations. And by the end of our development, we will have 47.2 hectares available for commercial operations. So we'll increase our commercial space from 8.5 hectares that we currently have now to 47 hectares. So a significant improvement in terms of our capacity to accommodate commercial business. The port will continue to operate 24/7 operations. We already do operate 24/7 because of the MOD, but we will continue to operate 24/7, although most activity will take place in normal working hours. We think that we are perfect for short-term storage, for fast-moving freight, but of course we can accommodate longer-term storage if required. We'll continue to support the MOD, and in fact we will definitely improve facilities within the port for the MOD, and that's very important from the local perspective because the local enjoy having the MOD and 17th Port and Maritime Regiment in Marchwood, and I think what we will do with the port will ensure the longevity of the use of the port for the MOD because we will be improving the capability for MOD operations. We'll be creating a new entrance into the port. For those of you who know, the entrance is on Cracknell Hard. We're going to be developing a much more an improved, more efficient entrance capability to ensure that as we get more traffic coming into the port, it doesn't build up on the road on Cracknell Hard and cause traffic congestion problems. We plan on having planning consent for 2 new warehouses so that should clients want to use the port and have warehouse facilities, we will have the planning consent for that. The port will continue to have a secure boundary with no public access. And throughout the port, we will be creating and enhancing ecological areas to meet our biodiversity net gain responsibilities. And as we design the port, we're trying to be very sympathetic to local residents with the landscaping to ensure that we have minimum impact in terms of visual impact, noise impact, and other impacts. Important to just highlight that we're not planning on changing the marine infrastructure as part of the planning application. So next slide, please. So here's a very high level view of what we intend to do with the port under our development plans. Just to take you to the diagram, the light grey areas are areas that we won't be developing. They're operational space that we will be leaving. Where you see offices, workshops and stores, actually we've got some great facilities there that are currently occupied by the MOD, but will come back to us in November 24. We've got a fantastic workshop facility, a very large workshop facility. We've got vehicle servicing bays and we've got a warehouse facility in that area marked offices, workshops and stores. And as it says, we've got offices as well. So that will be available for commercial use in November 24. The blue areas are indicative warehouse locations that I mentioned before. The green areas are the areas that we will be developing for ecological mitigation, and we will be improving the biodiversity value of those areas. We will also be delivering off-site ecological mitigation, and we're working very closely with New Forest District Council and New Forest Park Authority on that at the moment. And then the dark grey areas are the areas that we will be developing. So they will be areas of hard standing throughout the port. Some of them are already operational areas, and we will be doing surface improvements to those areas. Other areas are areas of grassland or scrub that we will be developing into high quality, hard standing concrete surfaces, ideal for a wide diversity of port activity. Thank you, Georgina. So in terms of investment and employment, our calculations show that we expect to create about 1,100 new skilled and semi-skilled jobs, and they will be a mixture of SGL jobs, but also jobs created by clients who will be operating out of the port. And clearly we hope that those jobs will be available to the local workforce, and we hope that we will employ a lot of local employees to support local prosperity. We're looking at apprenticeships and training that will give skills for life, and certainly the stevedores and security staff we've trained up have a wide range of skills now, which will give them skills for life. And we're working with organisations like Business South to support the Kickstart scheme. Out of those 1,100 new jobs, we think that about 350 will be in our first phase of development by 2024, and out of that number of 1,100, about 75% of those jobs will be on site, with 25% indirect and in the supporting supply chain for the port. We are very keen. Obviously, we have to comply with competition rules, but we are very keen that we will use local small and medium enterprises where possible for the port development. Recently, we did develop 9 acres. And we ran a competition, and we used a local construction company that did a fantastic job. So we are very, very keen that we will use local small and medium enterprises as far as possible for port development to ensure that our investment goes into the local economy. We are an armed forces covenant employer, and we've been awarded the silver award, and we hope that to get the gold award in the future, and that is because of our support to the army, particularly through the provision of reserve soldiers and a reserve capability. Looking at investment, Solent Gateway, the parent companies, will be investing in the region of 50 million into developing the port, and the ongoing conversations we have with future clients who want to operate out of the port indicate that the investment from other operators who will be developing their own facilities is anticipated to be at about 200 million. So a lot of investment going into Marchwood Port, and as we say, we hope to, as much of that will go into local small and medium enterprises. So as we said before, we hope that we will be a sort of a bright light of positivity during a fairly difficult time as we come out of the COVID crisis, through job creation and spending a lot of money on developing the port through local companies, and therefore really helping to boost local prosperity at a difficult time. Georgina, next slide, please. We are, sorry for Georgina. Thanks, Georgina. We're engaging with regional bodies such as the Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, the Solent LEP, who we work closely with, and we're also working closely with Hampshire County Council, New Forest District Council, and New Forest Park Authority, as we look to see how we can support growth in the region. We are encouraging sustainable businesses to the site, and we're really promoting the use of the sea rail connectivity. And it's interesting how many potential clients that is attracting to the port, who either use rail now or don't use rail, use road, but are very keen to try and switch from road to rail. So the ability to have sea rail logistics is a big attraction, undoubtedly, for potential customers. We're very keen to support the growth and longevity of other regional businesses, and a few examples there. We're working with, because we're bringing rail in for Network Rail. That rail goes around to the Eastleigh depot, where it is then welded into 216 metres before they go and fit it to the rail line. So the fact that we are providing a very good logistic facility for Network Rail that's so close to Eastleigh, I'm sure helps support the longevity of the Eastleigh facility. We're working with the wind, we're talking with the wind blade manufacturing industry, and we're working closely with Forley Refinery to support a number of their projects. So we do hope that by working with local companies, we will support we will support regional businesses and the growth and longevity of those businesses. We're very keen to support new technologies, for example, under consideration as we develop as we look at our future clients with our parent companies. Under consideration is the inclusion of a state-of-the-art automotive handling facility that would be orientated towards electric vehicles. As I said, we see ourselves as perfect for fast-moving, high-priority freight. A lot of it directly from sea to rail that we're promoting, and we will be investing in other new technologies such as new cranes shortly. Next slide, please, Georgina. So in terms of the flexibility and opportunity and what we can offer as a port, well, we've got roll-on, roll-off and load-on, load-off facilities. We've got two berths that can take 240-metre long vessels with an 8-metre guaranteed depth. We have done surveys on the jetty, and we could go to 9 metres without undermining the structure of our jetty. So that's an opportunity we might want to consider downstream. And we can take vessels of 25,000 metric tons. So we can take not the biggest vessels undoubtedly, but certainly medium-sized vessels. We will be procuring 2 tandem operated mobile harbour cranes, and we're looking to we will submit a hybrid planning application to give us maximum flexibility. So we will get full planning consent for the early phases of development in the port, and then we will have outline planning consent that allows a broad range of activity for the subsequent phases of development to remain as flexible as we can to accommodate as wide a range of business for potential customers who want to use the port. And again, examples of our sort of the scope of operations we can support. We're talking to a number of aggregates companies about aggregate operations and an aggregate terminal. And again, that's something that aggregate companies are very interested in, because they can set up a facility whereby they can move the aggregates via conveyor or tube straight from the berth to the area we've identified for aggregates. It's right next to the rail, so aggregates can then be loaded straight onto rail and moved out of the port by rail, or of course moved into the port by rail. So aggregates is an area that's generating a lot of interest. I've already mentioned that we've got the 108-metre rail coming in, and there are very few ports that have the ability to receive 108-metre segments of rail, put them straight onto rail to move them within the port, store them, and then move them out of the port by rail. We'll have the flexibility of warehouses, and we'll have lots of open storage to support a broad spectrum of port activity. So what overall, we're going to be delivering 47 hectares of what we believe to be very high quality logistics space connected by sea, road and rail. Environmental issues, clearly that's very important, and as you would expect, our planning application will include an environmental impact assessment. So we're doing lots of assessments on light, noise, air quality, visual impact, all of the potential impacts that you would expect. We will be delivering a biodiversity net gain of 10% as part of our social responsibilities, and that will be through a mixture of on-site and off-site mitigations, and we will be subject to a Habitats Directive assessment. We will, as I said before, we're very aware of the residential areas nearby, and so we're trying to design the port as sympathetically as we can to ensure that there is minimum noise, visual, dust and other impacts on the local residential areas. And of course, we will consider appropriate mitigations where required, and we're working very closely with New Forest District Council and Hampshire County Council as we go forward, preparing our planning application and looking at impacts and potential mitigations. Thank you, Georgina. So on to the last slide. We have done extensive communications and stakeholder engagement. We've just finished the period of public consultation, where we had lots of responses, and we're very grateful to everybody who did provide feedback and responded to our consultation. The main area of concern, as we expected, was around traffic on the local roads and how we will be adding to traffic numbers. But I must say there are also lots of very supportive comments and positive comments. So that was all really encouraging. We've done a range of stakeholder engagement. What I would do is I would draw your attention to we have a consultation website that gives more details of our port development plan, and on that website there is a virtual master plan and a fly-through, and I think the fly-through very effective, computer-generated fly-through that gives you a really good idea of what the port will look like once it's been fully developed. Just to give you an idea of timelines, we will be submitting our planning application in early May 21, hopefully for a determination in September 21, and then we will start the first phase of construction pretty much immediately after that in the autumn winter of 2021. So that's it. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Richard. One of the reasons we hold these breakfast meetings is to allow for the maritime community to coordinate and see the opportunities, and indeed, when you get a chance to look at the chat, Richard, there's a couple of things in there already that are coming from that. Mark Pembleton, good morning.
Morning, just getting myself off mute, Kevin. That was a really good presentation, Richard. Thank you very much for that. Very comprehensive, really interesting. Just congratulate you on all the amazing work you're doing. I just wanted to ask, because obviously we've got 3 ports now coming forward. That site looks like a classic site for Freeport opportunity. Have you looked at it and decided how Freeport benefits might help you with all your ideas and development plans?
Yeah, very much so. And we are. Lorna mentioned earlier the fact that the LEP is leading on a regional bid for Freeport, putting in the Freeport bid, and we are very much part of that community, developing, working with Vivid Economics and with the other ports. And I can see we've got Ian online as well, so Ian will be involved in that. We're all working together to produce that bid for the region with Solent LEP and with Vivid Economics. But absolutely, I mean, we think that we know that when they're looking at Freeport, they're looking at sites that have scope for development. We know that Portsmouth has been through a recent development. We're of course developing, the Forley Waterside site is developing as well. So the fact that we've got a lot of development going on, I hope will strengthen the region's bid to be a Freeport. But absolutely, in terms of tax, customs, permitted developments. There are lots of advantages, undoubtedly, of being a free port. That will make us and the other ports in the region much more attractive to attracting local businesses and therefore bringing businesses and further investment into the region. So definite advantages in the attractiveness of the region to support the maritime and other industries.
Sorry, can I cut across because I can't quite work out how to put my hand up on Zoom?
Yeah.
Go on, Ian.
A great presentation, Richard, and obviously you'll give some of us a bit of a headache in the region with a competing port.
Yeah, sorry.
And this is a very direct and perhaps a naughty question to ask, but you mentioned cranes in your presentation.
Yeah.
When are they likely to arrive?
So we are looking at getting them midway through next year. Yeah, it's clearly I have to go to my board with a business case, and we're in the process of producing that business case, but our aspiration is to have cranes towards the middle of next year. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, understood.
I'm very happy to chat offline to you about that, Ian, as well, further if you like.
Okay, thank you. Just to build on Richard's point, the Freeport's bid is very much a regional bid, so it isn't just about one of the ports, but it's a collective one for the region overall. So that's something that's come out through the consultation process that the LEPs run. Any other questions for Richard? Okay, don't see any. So thank you, Richard. Really interesting. Thank you for that. I say have a look at the chat because the networking element of this meeting is working well, and there's a few people want to talk to you, I think. So
Sure,
well done.
will do. Yeah, and then thank you for the time to present. Appreciate it.
Okay, no, you're very welcome. Thank you. Which takes us to any other business. Is there anything anyone would like to raise whilst we're all together?
I would just like to ask Lorna if she'd kindly send us an invite to the meeting regarding the Institute. Because as Kevin knows, with our OBC submission to the LEP and to the CSR, you know, we're very keen on the skills agenda. So I would value a conversation or certainly listening in on that.
Okay.
And yeah, I thought that both presentations are excellent. Thanks for organising this, guys.
No problem. Brett, if you can stick your email to me privately in the chat, and then I'll make sure.
I don't actually know how to do that. I talk the talk regarding technology, but I've absolutely no idea how to do it.
I'm sure Will have your email. We'll follow that up with you after this meeting.
Yeah, and if you could copy Paul in as well, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
And on Freeports, Kevin and Richard, you know that we're, and as Mark knows, you know, we certainly support that.
Yeah.
Okay, if I can just sum things up then, we'll look at us behaving, and we're going to finish on time, which is terrific. That sets off a day well if your first meeting of the day finishes on time. I've been blown away by the presentations this morning, actually. We're all learning so much, and that's as Kevin said earlier, that's exactly what, you know, this network is about, to learn more about what's out there and bring us together, strength in numbers. The next meeting will be on the 16th of December. The theme for that meeting is actually EU transition, and we are hoping to have, if possible, someone from the Department for International Trade supporting that meeting to answer some of your questions. That's a fairly heavy subject. I would say it's the 16th of December, so Christmas jumpers are optional. And if you want to make sure that you've brought yourself a mince pie, we'll have a business network virtual Christmas breakfast meeting. I won't make anyone sing any carols. So it'll be 9 till 10:30 on the 16th of December. The theme for the January meeting, we're lining up looking at environmental, an environmental theme. So if anyone out there would like to be part of that meeting as a speaker, if you want to talk to us, that's fine. We've already got an organisation that are going to well, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to tell you now actually, because that would give away the clue. I'll tell you in the next newsletter, but it's environmental issues for January and it's EU transition for December. We haven't yet got anything lined up for February, so I'm open to suggestions as always, but really grateful for your time. Thank you for all your questions. Fantastic presentations by both our presenters today, Katja and Richard. Thank you so much for that. And we will see you all again in December.
Indeed.
Okay.
Thank you all very much indeed.